Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chun stood at the front of the sterile briefing room, watching as three senior officers quietly gathered their folders and headed for the door. The soft click of the closing door echoed in the suddenly half-empty room, leaving behind only a handful of junior officers who shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The remaining attendees included two lieutenants, a chief petty officer, and Commander James Mitchell, who seemed more interested in his phone than the presentation. Sarah had seen this before. Too many times, actually. She was 32 years old, stood 5 feet 4 inches tall, and had the kind of quiet demeanor that often led people to underestimate her capabilities. Her voice carried a slight accent from her childhood in San Francisco's Chinatown, and her appearance often prompted assumptions about her role in the Navy that had nothing to do with her actual qualifications. The briefing was supposed to cover new tactical protocols for submarine warfare detection, a subject Sarah knew better than almost anyone in the Pacific Fleet. She had spent the last 8 years developing revolutionary techniques that had already saved lives and prevented international incidents. But the 3 departing officers, 2 captains and a rear admiral, apparently had more pressing matters to attend to than listening to what they probably assumed would be a basic overview from a junior officer. "Should I continue, ma'am?" asked Lieutenant Rodriguez, one of the remaining officers, gesturing toward the door where the senior staff had just exited. Sarah straightened her shoulders and clicked to the next slide. "Absolutely. What we're discussing today could mean the difference between detecting a hostile submarine and missing it entirely. That matters whether there are 5 people in this room or 50. The presentation covered a new acoustic signature analysis technique that Sarah had developed during her deployment aboard the USS Virginia. Traditional sonar operators relied heavily on established patterns and known signatures, but Sarah had discovered that modern submarines were using increasingly sophisticated sound-dampening technology that rendered conventional detection methods nearly useless. Her innovation involved analyzing microvariations in water displacement that occurred even when a submarine's acoustic signature was completely masked. The key insight, Sarah explained, manipulating the 3D visualization on the screen, is that while you can eliminate sound, you cannot eliminate displacement. Water has to move, and that movement creates patterns that we can detect if we know what to look for. Commander Mitchell finally looked up from his phone, his expression showing the first hint of genuine interest. "Lieutenant Commander, are you saying that existing sonar protocols are inadequate?" "Not inadequate, sir. Incomplete. Traditional methods work perfectly for submarines using older stealth technology, but near-peer adversaries have developed systems that can fool conventional sonar arrays. We need to adapt." Sarah clicked to a slide showing real-world test results from exercises in the South China Sea. The data was impressive. Her technique had successfully detected submarines that had completely evaded traditional sonar nets. During one particularly crucial exercise, her methods had identified a Chinese submarine that was conducting surveillance operations just outside territorial waters, potentially preventing a serious diplomatic incident. "These numbers are remarkable," admitted Lieutenant Rodriguez, leaning forward to study the data more carefully. "How long did it take you to develop this methodology?" 3 years of field testing and refinement. I started working on the theoretical framework during my first deployment as a sonar operator, then spent 2 years collecting data and running simulations. The breakthrough came during a joint exercise with the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force, when we encountered a submarine that was completely invisible to our existing systems. Sarah remembered that exercise vividly. She had been a junior lieutenant at the time, fresh out of advanced sonar school, and eager to prove herself. The Japanese had challenged the American fleet to locate one of their newest diesel-electric submarines during a training scenario. For 6 hours, multiple American vessels had searched unsuccessfully while the Japanese submarine remained completely undetected. Sarah had been monitoring the sonar displays from her station aboard the USS Columbia when she noticed something odd. While there were no acoustic signatures indicating a submarine presence, the water displacement patterns showed tiny inconsistencies that didn't match natural ocean movements. She had mentioned this to her supervisor, who initially dismissed her observations as background noise. I convinced my chief to let me run a detailed analysis of the displacement data, Sarah continued, addressing the small group in the briefing room. It took 14 hours of careful examination, but I was eventually able to predict the submarine's location to within 50 meters. When we shared this information with the exercise coordinators, they confirmed that the Japanese submarine was exactly where my calculations indicated. That had been the beginning of everything. Her supervisor, initially skeptical, became her strongest advocate once the results were verified. The Japanese submarine commander had been so impressed that he requested a detailed briefing on Sarah's methodology, leading to collaborative research that strengthened both nations' submarine detection capabilities. But success in the field didn't automatically translate to respect in the briefing room. Sarah had learned that lesson repeatedly over the past 5 years. Her innovations had been implemented fleet-wide, her techniques were now taught at submarine warfare schools, and her research had been published in classified military journals. Yet she still found herself presenting to half-empty rooms, while senior officers found excuses to attend other meetings. The practical applications extend beyond detection, Sarah explained, advancing to the next section of her presentation. This same methodology can be used to track submarine movements over extended periods, predict optimal firing positions, and even estimate submarine class and nationality based on displacement patterns. Chief Petty Officer Williams raised his hand. "Ma'am, how difficult is this technique to learn? I mean, for operators who've been using traditional sonar methods for years." It was a good question, and one that Sarah had spent considerable time addressing. The basic principles can be taught in 2 weeks. Mastery takes about 6 months of practical application. The key is learning to recognize patterns that conventional training teaches you to ignore. We're essentially rewiring years of established thinking. Sarah had personally trained over 200 sonar operators in her new techniques, traveling to bases across the Pacific to conduct intensive workshops. The feedback had been overwhelmingly positive, with operators reporting significant improvements in detection rates and tracking accuracy. Several had written testimonials describing how Sarah's methods had helped them identify threats that would have otherwise gone unnoticed. Commander Mitchell was now paying full attention, having put his phone away entirely. "Lieutenant Commander Chun, I have to ask, why haven't I heard about this before today? These results seem like they should be front-page news in naval intelligence circles." Sarah paused, choosing her words carefully. "The techniques have been implemented gradually over the past 3 years, sir. Multiple fleet exercises have validated the effectiveness, and the methodology is now part of standard training curricula at several facilities. However, widespread briefings for senior staff have been limited." She didn't mention the resistance she had encountered from certain quarters, the suggestions that her innovations were unnecessary complications of proven methods, or the subtle implications that a relatively junior officer shouldn't be proposing wholesale changes to established doctrine. Sarah had learned to navigate these challenges diplomatically, focusing on results rather than recognition. "This displacement analysis," Lieutenant Rodriguez interjected, studying the technical diagrams, "it requires significant computational power, doesn't it? How do you handle processing requirements on smaller vessels?" "Excellent question. We've developed a streamlined version that can run on standard shipboard systems. The full analysis suite requires more processing power, but the essential detection algorithms can operate on existing hardware with minimal modifications." Sarah had anticipated this concern early in her development process. There was no point creating revolutionary detection methods if they required expensive system upgrades that would limit deployment. Working with civilian technology contractors, she had optimized her algorithms to run efficiently on the computing systems already installed on Navy vessels. The presentation continued with detailed case studies from recent operations. Sarah described how her techniques had been used successfully during freedom of navigation operations in disputed waters, how they had provided early warning of submarine activity during joint exercises with allied nations, and how they had contributed to the successful completion of several classified missions. "The most significant advantage," Sarah explained, "is strategic surprise. Adversary submarines believe they are undetectable when using advanced stealth technology. Our ability to track them despite their countermeasures provides a crucial tactical advantage that could prove decisive in any conflict scenario. As the briefing concluded, the remaining officers asked detailed questions about implementation timelines, training requirements, and operational protocols. The discussion that followed was exactly what Sarah had hoped for when she originally scheduled the presentation. Substantive engagement with the technical aspects of her work and serious consideration of its strategic implications. Commander Mitchell approached the podium as other attendees began filing out. Lieutenant Commander Chun, I owe you an apology. I came into this briefing expecting a routine technical update, and instead I've learned about innovations that could fundamentally change how we approach submarine warfare. Thank you, sir. That means a great deal. I'm curious about something, Mitchell continued, lowering his voice slightly. Those officers who left early, do they know what they missed? Sarah smiled diplomatically. I suspect they'll find out eventually, sir. Good work has a way of making itself known. What Sarah didn't know was that her reputation had already reached much higher levels than she realized. Admiral William Harrison, commander of the Pacific Fleet, had been reviewing quarterly reports that consistently mentioned impressive sonar detection rates across multiple vessels. The common factor in these reports was the implementation of techniques developed by Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chun. Harrison had made a note to learn more about these innovations and the officer responsible for them. The next morning, Sarah returned to her regular duties as the submarine warfare specialist aboard the USS Columbia. Her official title understated her actual responsibilities, which included overseeing sonar operations, training junior personnel, and continuously refining the detection methods she had pioneered. The Columbia was conducting patrol operations in international waters, part of a routine deployment that had been extended due to increasing regional tensions. Sarah's workspace was a compact but efficient area within the submarine's sonar compartment, surrounded by displays showing acoustic data, water temperature readings, and the complex visualization software she had helped design. She spent her mornings analyzing overnight sensor data and her afternoons training the next generation of sonar operators. "Ma'am," called Petty Officer Thompson from across the compartment, "we're picking up something unusual on the southeastern approaches." Sarah moved to Thompson's station and examined the displays. Traditional sonar showed nothing but background ocean noise, but the displacement analysis revealed subtle patterns suggesting a large object moving slowly through the water approximately 12 miles away. "Run a full spectral analysis," Sarah instructed. "Let's see what we're dealing with." The analysis took several minutes, during which Sarah studied the patterns carefully. The displacement signature was consistent with a nuclear submarine, probably Chinese based on the movement characteristics, but the acoustic profile was completely clean. Without her detection methods, this submarine would have remained completely invisible to American sensors. "Contact the bridge," Sarah told Thompson. "Inform the captain that we have a probable submarine contact bearing 170, range approximately 12 miles. Classification uncertain, but displacement signature suggests nuclear propulsion." This was exactly the kind of situation where Sarah's innovations proved their value. The submarine they had detected was clearly conducting some form of surveillance or reconnaissance mission, believing itself to be completely hidden from American detection capabilities. Instead, Sarah's team was now tracking its every movement while remaining undetected themselves. Captain Rodriguez arrived in the sonar compartment within minutes, followed by the executive officer and the navigator. "What do we have, Chun?" Sarah briefed them quickly on the detection, showing the displacement patterns on the main display. "The submarine appears to be conducting a systematic search pattern, possibly looking for something specific in this area." "Recommendations?" asked the captain. "We maintain passive tracking and gather intelligence on their capabilities. This is an opportunity to observe their operations while they believe they're unobserved. We can learn a great deal about their technology and tactics." For the next 6 hours, Sarah's team tracked the foreign submarine as it conducted its mission, whatever that might be. They observed its movement patterns, documented its acoustic signature characteristics, and gathered valuable intelligence about its capabilities. All of this information would be analyzed by Navy intelligence and used to improve future detection and tracking methods. As evening approached, the foreign submarine finally departed the area, apparently having completed its mission. Sarah compiled a detailed report of the encounter, including technical analysis of the submarine's characteristics and recommendations for future monitoring protocols. Outstanding work, Chun, Captain Rodriguez told her as she submitted her report. Once again, your techniques have given us a significant operational advantage. Sarah appreciated the recognition, but she was already thinking about improvements to her methodology based on what they had observed. Each encounter provided new data that could be used to refine the detection algorithms and improve their effectiveness. The work never ended. It just got more sophisticated. That night, as the Columbia continued its patrol, Sarah worked late in her quarters, updating the technical documentation for her detection methods. She was preparing materials for the next training deployment, where she would teach her techniques to sonar operators from 3 different submarine crews. Sarah had long ago stopped expecting recognition from senior leadership for her innovations. She found satisfaction in the work itself and in the knowledge that her techniques were making American submarines more effective and American sailors safer. That was enough for her, even if she sometimes had to present her briefings to half-empty rooms. What she didn't know was that her report from today's submarine encounter would land on Admiral Harrison's desk within 48 hours, along with a note from Captain Rodriguez praising Sarah's exceptional technical innovation and tactical awareness. The Admiral was beginning to realize that Lieutenant Commander Chun was someone he needed to meet personally. 3 weeks after the submarine encounter, Sarah was preparing for another round of training deployments when she received an unexpected message. Commander Mitchell, who had attended her briefing, requested a private meeting to discuss operational matters of significant importance. Sarah assumed this meant more questions about implementation timelines or resource requirements for her detection systems. The meeting was scheduled for 1,400 hours in Mitchell's office aboard the USS Pearl Harbor, the command vessel for their current task force. Sarah arrived precisely on time, carrying a folder with updated technical specifications and training materials. She knocked twice and entered when summoned. Lieutenant Commander Chun, thank you for coming, Mitchell said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. I want to discuss your background and qualifications in more detail. Sarah settled into the chair, somewhat puzzled by the direction of the conversation. Of course, sir. Is there something specific you'd like to know? Let's start with your education. I've been reviewing your personnel file, and your academic credentials are impressive. MIT for undergraduate work, Stanford for graduate studies, both in advanced mathematics and computer science. That's not the typical path for a naval officer. No, sir, it's not. I originally planned to work in civilian research, but I decided that I wanted to serve my country and apply my skills in a military context. The Navy offered opportunities to work with cutting-edge detection technology that weren't available in the private sector. Sarah had made that decision during her final year at Stanford, when a guest lecturer from the Office of Naval Research had described the technical challenges facing modern submarine warfare. The problems he outlined were exactly the kind of complex, multidimensional puzzles that Sarah found irresistible. She had enlisted immediately after graduation, despite receiving multiple offers from technology companies in Silicon Valley. Your service record shows rapid advancement and consistently exceptional performance ratings, Mitchell continued, flipping through several pages. Submarine Warfare School, top 5% of her class. Advanced Sonar Systems School, graduated first with a perfect score on the technical examination. Multiple commendations for innovation and problem solving. I've been fortunate to work with excellent mentors and supportive commanding officers, sir. Chun, I'm going to be direct with you. The innovations you've developed represent a fundamental shift in submarine detection capabilities. Your work is having strategic implications that extend far beyond individual ship operations. Are you aware of how widely your techniques are being implemented? Sarah hesitated before answering. She knew that her methods were being taught at training facilities and implemented across the fleet, but she hadn't received detailed information about the scope of adoption. I know that the techniques have been well received, sir, but I don't have access to fleet-wide implementation data. Let me share some numbers with you, Mitchell said, pulling out a classified report. Over the past 18 months, submarine detection rates in the Pacific Theater have improved by 37%. Tracking accuracy has increased by 42%. False positive rates have decreased by 61%. These improvements are directly attributable to the implementation of your displacement analysis methodology. Sarah was genuinely surprised by these statistics. She had known that her techniques were effective, but she hadn't realized the extent of their impact on overall fleet performance. That's very gratifying to hear, sir. There's more. Your methods have been shared with allied navies through intelligence cooperation agreements. The Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force has reported similar improvements in their detection capabilities. The Australians are implementing your techniques across their submarine fleet. The British Royal Navy has requested detailed technical briefings. The conversation was taking a direction that Sarah hadn't anticipated. She was accustomed to working in relative obscurity, focused on technical problems rather than strategic implications. Hearing about the international scope of her work was both exciting and somewhat overwhelming. Commander, may I ask why you're sharing this information with me? Mitchell leaned back in his chair, studying Sarah carefully. Because there are people at very high levels who are beginning to take notice of your work. And I want to make sure you're prepared for what might come next. What do you mean, sir? I mean that your innovations have caught the attention of Admiral Harrison. He's been asking questions about the officer responsible for these detection improvements. Your name has come up in conversations at levels where junior officers are rarely discussed. Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Admiral Harrison commanded the entire Pacific Fleet, overseeing operations across the largest ocean on Earth. The fact that her work had reached his attention was simultaneously thrilling and intimidating. The Admiral has requested a comprehensive briefing on your techniques and their strategic applications, Mitchell continued. This won't be like the presentation you gave 3 weeks ago, where half the audience walked out. This will be a formal presentation to senior Pacific Fleet leadership, including Admiral Harrison and his staff. When is this scheduled, sir? 2 weeks from today. Pearl Harbor Naval Base, in the Admiral's conference room. You'll have 90 minutes to present your work, followed by a question and answer session that could last another hour. Sarah's mind immediately began racing through the implications. This was the opportunity she had never allowed herself to hope for, a chance to present her work directly to the leadership that could authorize widespread implementation and continued development funding. It was also the kind of high-stakes situation where a single mistake could undermine years of careful research and development. I'll need to prepare comprehensive materials, Sarah said, already mentally organizing the presentation structure. Technical documentation, operational results, implementation timelines, resource requirements. John, Mitchell interrupted, I want you to understand something important. This briefing isn't just about your detection techniques. The Admiral is evaluating you as an officer and as a strategic asset for the Navy. Your technical innovations are impressive, but your leadership potential and strategic thinking are equally important. This was a perspective Sarah hadn't considered. She had always focused on the technical aspects of her work, viewing herself primarily as a problem solver and innovator. The idea that she might be evaluated for broader leadership responsibilities was both flattering and daunting. What should I emphasize in the presentation? Everything. Technical excellence, operational results, strategic implications, and future development possibilities. But also demonstrate your ability to think beyond individual technical problems. Show that you understand how your work fits into broader military objectives and national security priorities. Mitchell stood and walked to the window overlooking the harbor. Sarah, can I speak to you off the record for a moment? Of course, sir. You're one of the most technically gifted officers I've encountered in 20 years of service. But you also have something else that's equally valuable, the ability to see possibilities that others miss. That combination is rare, and it's exactly what the Navy needs as we face increasingly sophisticated threats. Thank you, sir. That means a great deal. There's something else you should know. The officers who walked out of your briefing 3 weeks ago, they've since learned about the importance of your work through other channels. Captain Williams has specifically asked to be included in your upcoming presentation to Admiral Harrison. Apparently, he's realized that missing your briefing was a significant mistake. Sarah couldn't suppress a slight smile at this information. She had long ago stopped taking such slights personally, but it was satisfying to know that her work was eventually recognized regardless of initial skepticism. The point is, Mitchell continued, you're going to have the full attention of Pacific Fleet leadership for this presentation. Use it wisely. Over the following week, Sarah threw herself into preparation with characteristic intensity. She reviewed every aspect of her detection methodology, compiled comprehensive operational data from 18 months of field testing, and developed detailed projections for future development possibilities. She also researched the strategic context of submarine warfare in the Pacific theater, ensuring that she could speak intelligently about how her technical innovations supported broader military objectives. Sarah's preparation process was methodical and thorough. She began by creating a comprehensive outline that covered every aspect of her work, from the theoretical foundations of displacement analysis to practical implementation challenges and solutions. She then developed supporting materials, including technical diagrams, operational statistics, video demonstrations, and detailed case studies from real-world operations. The technical sections required particular attention to detail. Sarah needed to explain complex mathematical concepts and signal processing techniques in terms that would be accessible to senior officers whose expertise lay in strategy and operations rather than advanced mathematics. She spent hours refining her explanations, eliminating unnecessary jargon while maintaining technical accuracy. The operational data was equally important. Sarah compiled statistics from every ship and submarine that had implemented her techniques, tracking detection rates, false positive percentages, tracking accuracy improvements, and operational success stories. She also gathered testimonials from commanding officers and sonar operators who had used her methods in actual operations. Strategic implications were perhaps the most challenging aspect of the presentation to develop. Sarah had always focused on technical problems rather than broader policy questions, but she understood that Admiral Harrison would want to understand how her innovations affected overall fleet capabilities and strategic planning. She researched current threats in the Pacific theater, studied intelligence assessments of adversary submarine capabilities, and analyzed how improved detection methods could influence future conflict scenarios. Sarah also prepared for the inevitable questions about resource requirements, training timelines, and implementation challenges. She developed detailed cost estimates for fleet-wide adoption of her techniques, realistic schedules for training programs, and honest assessments of potential technical limitations and areas requiring further development. The most difficult aspect of her preparation was learning to present herself as more than just a technical specialist. Commander Mitchell's advice about demonstrating leadership potential and strategic thinking weighed heavily on her mind. Sarah had never sought recognition or advancement beyond the opportunity to work on interesting problems, but she was beginning to understand that broader responsibilities might be necessary to ensure continued development and implementation of her innovations. As the date of the presentation approached, Sarah received updates from various sources about the level of interest her briefing had generated. Commander Mitchell informed her that Admiral Harrison had specifically requested detailed technical specifications in advance, suggesting serious consideration of major resource allocation for further development. Captain Rodriguez mentioned that intelligence analysts were eager to learn more about the strategic implications of improved submarine detection capabilities. Most significantly, Sarah learned that representatives from the Office of Naval Research would attend the presentation, indicating potential interest in expanded research funding and collaboration with civilian technology partners. This suggested that her work might evolve from tactical innovation to strategic capability development, with implications extending far beyond individual ship operations. Sarah spent the final days before her presentation conducting practice runs with junior officers aboard the Columbia, refining her explanations and anticipating potential questions. She also worked with the ship's communication staff to ensure that all visual aids and technical demonstrations would function properly during the actual briefing. The night before her departure for Pearl Harbor, Sarah reviewed her materials one final time. The presentation represented 8 years of intensive work, from her initial observations during submarine warfare school through the breakthrough during joint exercises with the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force, to the comprehensive testing and refinement that had led to fleet-wide implementation. Sarah realized that this presentation could be a turning point in her career, potentially leading to opportunities she had never considered. But regardless of what came next, she was proud of the work she had accomplished and confident that her innovations were making American sailors safer and more effective. As she packed her materials for travel to Pearl Harbor, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From the half-empty briefing room, where senior officers had walked out, to a formal presentation before the Pacific Fleet commander, her persistence and dedication to technical excellence had eventually earned the recognition that her work deserved. The presentation was scheduled for 0900 hours in Admiral Harrison's conference room. Sarah would finally have the opportunity to demonstrate the full scope and significance of her innovations to the leadership that could ensure their continued development and implementation. After years of working in relative obscurity, she was ready to step into the spotlight and advocate for the techniques that had already proven their strategic value. What Sarah didn't know was that Admiral Harrison had already made preliminary decisions about her future based on the reports he had received about her work. The presentation would be important, but it was as much an opportunity for him to evaluate her personally as it was for her to demonstrate her technical innovations. The Admiral was considering possibilities for Sarah's career that extended far beyond her current role as a submarine warfare specialist. The morning of her presentation, Sarah arrived at Pearl Harbor Naval Base 90 minutes early. She wanted adequate time to test all equipment, review her materials one final time, and mentally prepare for what could be the most important 90 minutes of her naval career. The base was bustling with typical morning activity, but Sarah barely noticed as she focused on the task ahead. The conference room where she would present was located on the 3rd floor of the Pacific Fleet Headquarters building, a modern facility with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor, where the USS Arizona Memorial served as a constant reminder of the stakes involved in naval warfare. Sarah had visited the memorial several times during previous trips to Pearl Harbor, and the historical significance of a location added weight to her current mission. Sarah spent 30 minutes setting up her equipment and testing the audiovisual systems. The conference room was equipped with state-of-the-art presentation technology, including multiple large displays, advanced audio systems, and video conferencing capabilities that would allow remote participation from other Pacific Fleet installations. She ran through her entire presentation twice, ensuring that every slide, animation, and technical demonstration functioned perfectly. At 0830 hours, staff members began arriving to prepare the room for Admiral Harrison and his leadership team. Sarah observed their professional efficiency with appreciation, knowing that attention to detail at every level contributed to operational success. A chief petty officer approached her to confirm final technical requirements and offered assistance with any last-minute adjustments. Lieutenant Commander Chun, Admiral Harrison will arrive at 0855 hours, the chief informed her. He prefers to begin presentations promptly at the scheduled time, so please be ready to start immediately upon his arrival. Understood, Chief. Everything is prepared. Sarah used the remaining time to review her opening remarks and mentally rehearse the critical transition points in her presentation. She had structured the briefing to begin with strategic context, move through technical explanations, present operational results, and conclude with future development recommendations. Each section built upon the previous one, creating a comprehensive argument for the continued development and expanded implementation of her detection techniques. At precisely 0855 hours, Admiral William Harrison entered the conference room, followed by his staff officers and the various personnel who would attend the briefing. Sarah immediately understood why the Admiral commanded such respect throughout the Pacific Fleet. Harrison was a tall, imposing figure with silver hair and penetrating blue eyes that seemed to take in every detail of his surroundings instantly. His presence filled the room with an almost tangible sense of authority and purpose. "Good morning, Lieutenant Commander Chun," Admiral Harrison said, extending his hand for a firm handshake. "I've been looking forward to this briefing. Your work has generated considerable interest at multiple levels of command." "Good morning, Admiral. Thank you for this opportunity to present my research and operational results." Admiral Harrison took his seat at the head of the conference table, flanked by Rear Admiral Patricia Stevens, his deputy commander, and Captain Michael Thompson, his chief of staff. The other attendees included representatives from Naval Intelligence, the Office of Naval Research, submarine warfare specialists, and several commanding officers from major vessels in the Pacific Fleet. Sarah noted with satisfaction that Captain Williams, one of the officers who had walked out of her previous briefing, was among those present. "Admiral, before Lieutenant Commander Chun begins her presentation," said Rear Admiral Stevens, "I'd like to note that her techniques have been implemented aboard 17 submarines and 12 surface vessels in our command. The operational results have been consistently impressive across all platforms." "Thank you, Admiral Stevens. Lieutenant Commander Chun, please proceed with your briefing." Sarah began with a strategic overview of submarine threats in the Pacific theater, using classified intelligence assessments to demonstrate the increasing sophistication of adversary submarine capabilities. She explained how traditional detection methods were becoming less effective against modern stealth technology, creating significant gaps in American naval defense capabilities. "The fundamental challenge we face," Sarah explained, manipulating a three-dimensional display showing submarine positions and detection ranges, is that our adversaries have developed acoustic dampening systems that render conventional sonar nearly useless. This creates tactical situations where enemy submarines can operate undetected in areas we consider secure. Admiral Harrison leaned forward, studying the display intently. "Lieutenant Commander, are you saying that existing protocols are inadequate for current threat environments?" "Not inadequate, Admiral, but insufficient. Traditional methods remain effective against older submarine classes, but near-peer adversaries have deployed systems specifically designed to defeat conventional sonar arrays. We need complementary detection capabilities to maintain our tactical advantage." Sarah then transitioned to the technical foundation of her displacement analysis methodology, carefully explaining the mathematical principles without overwhelming her audience with unnecessary complexity. She described how submarines, regardless of their acoustic signature, must still displace water as they move, creating patterns that could be detected and analyzed using advanced signal processing techniques. "The breakthrough insight," Sarah continued, showing comparative analyses of traditional sonar versus displacement detection, was recognizing that displacement patterns contain unique signatures that remain consistent regardless of acoustic stealth measures. "We're essentially looking at the shadow cast by the submarine rather than the submarine itself." Captain Thompson raised his hand. "Lieutenant Commander, how reliable is this displacement signature analysis? Are there environmental factors that could produce false positives?" "Excellent question, sir. Initial development did produce significant false positive rates, particularly in areas with complex underwater terrain or heavy commercial shipping traffic. However, we've refined the algorithms to filter out environmental noise and distinguish between submarine signatures and other displacement sources. Current false positive rates are below 2% in typical operational environments." Sarah presented detailed statistics from 18 months of operational testing, showing consistent improvements in detection rates, tracking accuracy, and tactical effectiveness across multiple vessel classes and operational scenarios. She included specific case studies from recent exercises and operations, carefully avoiding classified details while demonstrating the strategic value of her innovations. During Operation Pacific Guardian last year, Sarah explained, referring to a major joint exercise with Allied navies, vessels using traditional detection methods identified 63% of simulated hostile submarines. Vessels equipped with displacement analysis detected 91% of the same targets. This improvement could prove decisive in actual conflict scenarios. Admiral Harrison exchanged glances with his staff officers, clearly impressed by the operational data. Lieutenant Commander, what are the resource requirements for fleet-wide implementation of your techniques? Sarah had anticipated this question and prepared comprehensive cost analyses. Full implementation across the Pacific Fleet would require approximately 18 months and represent a significant but manageable investment in training and equipment upgrades. The computing requirements can be met with modifications to existing systems rather than complete replacements. Break down those costs for me, Admiral Harrison requested. Training represents the largest component, approximately 8,000 personnel across submarine and surface vessel sonar departments. We estimate 6 weeks of intensive training per operator, with ongoing refresher programs. Equipment modifications are less expensive, primarily involving software upgrades and enhanced processing capabilities for existing sonar arrays. Sarah continued with detailed implementation timelines, training protocols, and resource allocation recommendations. She had worked with procurement specialists and training coordinators to develop realistic schedules that would minimize operational disruptions while ensuring effective adoption of the new techniques. The strategic implications extend beyond improved detection capabilities, Sarah explained, advancing to her final section. Enhanced submarine tracking allows for more effective tactical planning, improved convoy protection, and better coordination with Allied naval forces. We can also anticipate adversary movements more accurately and position our assets more effectively. Rear Admiral Stevens asked, how have Allied navies responded to information sharing about these techniques? Very positively, Admiral. The Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force has reported similar operational improvements after implementing modified versions of our algorithms. The Australian Navy has requested comprehensive training programs for their submarine crews. British submarine commanders have described the techniques as revolutionary for anti-submarine warfare. Sarah concluded her formal presentation with recommendations for continued development and expanded implementation. She proposed establishment of a dedicated research and development program to further refine the techniques, development of automated analysis systems to reduce operator workload, and creation of standardized training curricula for international cooperation programs. In summary, Sarah said, displacement analysis represents a fundamental advancement in submarine detection capabilities that directly addresses current strategic challenges while providing a foundation for continued technological development. The operational results demonstrate clear tactical advantages that justify continued investment and expanded implementation. Admiral Harrison sat quietly for several moments after Sarah finished, studying the comprehensive materials she had presented. The silence stretched long enough to make Sarah slightly uncomfortable, but she remained composed while awaiting his response. Lieutenant Commander Chun, the Admiral finally, said, "Your presentation has been extraordinarily thorough and impressive. The operational results speak for themselves, and the strategic implications are significant. I have several questions about implementation details and future development possibilities." For the next hour, Admiral Harrison and his staff questioned Sarah extensively about every aspect of her work. They explored technical limitations, discussed resource allocation priorities, examined training requirements, and analyzed strategic implications for Pacific Fleet operations. Sarah answered each question clearly and comprehensively, demonstrating both technical expertise and strategic understanding. Captain Williams, who had walked out of Sarah's previous briefing, asked about compatibility with existing submarine warfare doctrines. "Lieutenant Commander, How do these techniques integrate with current tactical protocols? The techniques are designed to complement rather than replace existing methods, sir. Traditional sonar remains essential for detailed target analysis and weapons guidance. Displacement analysis provides initial detection and tracking capabilities that enhance overall tactical effectiveness without disrupting established procedures. Admiral Harrison concluded the questioning session with a direct assessment. Lieutenant Commander Chun, your innovations represent exactly the kind of technological advancement that maintains American naval superiority. The operational results are impressive, the strategic implications are significant, and your presentation has been exceptionally professional. Thank you, Admiral. I'm authorizing immediate expansion of implementation across all Pacific Fleet submarines and designation of your techniques as priority training for sonar personnel. I'm also directing the Office of Naval Research to establish a formal development program with you as the principal investigator. Sarah was momentarily stunned by the scope of Admiral Harrison's commitment to her work. The authorization represented resources and recognition far beyond what she had expected from the briefing. Additionally, Admiral Harrison continued, I'm recommending you for promotion to Commander and assignment as Pacific Fleet Senior Submarine Warfare Innovation Specialist. Your technical expertise and strategic insight are exactly what we need to maintain our tactical advantage in an increasingly challenging threat environment. The room fell silent as the implications of Admiral Harrison's announcement settled in. Sarah had entered the briefing as a lieutenant commander, hoping to gain support for continued development of her techniques. She was leaving with promotion, expanded resources, and responsibility for innovation across the entire Pacific Fleet. Admiral, I'm honored by your confidence in my work and your commitment to continued development of these capabilities. The honor is ours, Commander Chun. Your innovations are making American sailors safer and more effective. That's exactly what exceptional naval officers are supposed to accomplish. As the meeting concluded, several attendees approached Sarah to discuss specific aspects of her work and potential collaboration opportunities. The representative from the Office of Naval Research was particularly interested in expanding her research to include other aspects of submarine warfare technology. Sarah realized that her career had just taken a dramatic turn toward broader responsibilities and greater visibility. The recognition she had never actively sought was now accompanied by expectations for continued innovation and leadership that would challenge her in entirely new ways. 6 months after her presentation to Admiral Harrison, Commander Sarah Chun stood in her new office at Pacific Fleet Headquarters, reviewing intelligence reports that would have been far above her clearance level just a year earlier. The office overlooked Pearl Harbor, providing a constant view of the naval operations she now helped coordinate and improve. Her promotion had come through quickly, along with her new assignment as Senior Submarine Warfare Innovation Specialist for the entire Pacific Fleet. The transition from tactical operator to strategic planner had been challenging, but rewarding. Sarah now supervised a team of 12 technical specialists, coordinated research projects with civilian contractors, and provided guidance on submarine warfare capabilities to Admiral Harrison's planning staff. Her displacement analysis techniques have been implemented across the entire Pacific Fleet, with training programs expanded to include allied navies throughout the region. Commander Chun, her assistant, Lieutenant Jennifer Park, announced over the intercom, Admiral Harrison requests your presence in the command center immediately. Priority 1. Sarah grabbed her secure tablet and headed for the command center, wondering what crisis required her immediate attention. Priority 1 notifications were reserved for situations with potential strategic implications, usually involving hostile submarine activity or intelligence concerning adversary naval capabilities. The command center was a cathedral of modern naval warfare, filled with enormous displays showing ship positions, submarine contacts, and intelligence assessment from across the Pacific Ocean. Admiral Harrison stood at the Central Command Station, surrounded by his senior staff and several officers Sarah didn't immediately recognize. Their expressions suggested serious concern about whatever situation had developed. "Commander Chun," Admiral Harrison called as she approached, "we have a situation that requires your expertise. How quickly can your displacement analysis systems be deployed to the South China Sea?" "That depends on the specific requirements, Admiral. We have portable systems that can be operational within 72 hours, or we can coordinate with vessels already in the area that have the capability installed." Admiral Harrison gestured to the main display, which showed a detailed map of the South China Sea with multiple red icons indicating submarine contacts. Chinese naval forces have been conducting unusual submarine operations in this region for the past week. Traditional detection methods have identified some activity, but we suspect there are additional submarines operating undetected. Sarah studied the display carefully, noting the patterns of known contacts and the gaps where additional submarines might be operating. "Admiral, are we dealing with a training exercise or something more significant?" "Unknown at this time," replied Rear Admiral Stevens, joining the conversation. The activity began shortly after tensions increased over the latest territorial disputes. Chinese surface vessels have been more aggressive in their patrol patterns, and satellite intelligence suggests increased submarine construction at several facilities. Commander Thompson, the Chief of Staff, provided additional context. "Intelligence analysts believe this could be a test of our detection capabilities, preparation for larger operations, or simply an expanded training program. Regardless of the intent, we need accurate assessment of actual submarine numbers and capabilities." Sarah understood the strategic implications immediately. If Chinese forces were testing American detection capabilities, her displacement analysis techniques could provide crucial intelligence about their operational plans and tactical capabilities. If they were preparing for larger operations, early warning of submarine positions could prevent strategic surprise. "I recommend immediate deployment of our most advanced portable systems to USS Princeton and USS Columbia, both currently operating in the South China Sea," Sarah suggested. "We can also coordinate with Japanese and Australian vessels that have trained operators and compatible equipment." "Make it happen," Admiral Harrison directed. "I want comprehensive analysis of submarine activity in that region within 96 hours. Sarah immediately began coordinating the deployment through her secure communication channels. The portable displacement analysis systems were sophisticated pieces of equipment that required careful transportation and expert installation, but her team had practiced rapid deployment scenarios extensively. Within hours, technical specialists were aboard aircraft bound for rendezvous with the designated vessels. The operation, designated Pacific Watch, became Sarah's first major test as a strategic coordinator rather than a tactical specialist. She found herself managing multiple teams simultaneously, coordinating with international partners, and briefing senior leadership on developing intelligence assessments. The responsibilities were far broader than anything she had previously experienced. Over the following 72 hours, data began flowing from the South China Sea that confirmed everyone's suspicions. Traditional sonar had detected 5 Chinese submarines operating in the disputed waters. Sarah's displacement analysis revealed 11 additional submarines that had remained completely undetected by conventional methods. The actual scope of Chinese submarine operations was nearly 3 times larger than originally assessed. "Admiral," Sarah reported during the morning briefing, "we're tracking 16 Chinese submarines in total, operating in coordinated patrol patterns across 3 major shipping lanes. This represents the largest submarine deployment we've observed from Chinese forces in peacetime." Admiral Harrison studied the tracking data with obvious concern. "Commander, what's your assessment of their tactical intent?" Sarah had spent hours analyzing the submarine movement patterns, comparing them to known Chinese naval doctrines and previous operational behavior. The patrol patterns suggest a comprehensive surveillance operation, possibly designed to monitor our response capabilities. However, the submarines are also positioned to potentially disrupt commercial shipping if directed to do so. Recommendations? Maintain passive tracking while gathering detailed intelligence on their capabilities and operational procedures. The fact that most of these submarines believe they're undetected gives us significant tactical advantage. We can observe their actual operational methods without compromising our detection capabilities. Admiral Harrison approved Sarah's recommendation, leading to the largest peacetime submarine surveillance operation in decades. American and Allied vessels tracked Chinese submarine movements for 2 weeks, gathering unprecedented intelligence about their tactics, communication procedures, and technological capabilities. The operation proved the strategic value of Sarah's innovations beyond any doubt. Without displacement analysis, American forces would have been aware of only a fraction of the actual Chinese submarine presence, potentially leading to serious miscalculations about their intentions and capabilities. The intelligence gathered during Pacific Watch informed strategic planning throughout the Pacific theater and strengthened coordination with Allied navies. Commander Chun, Admiral Harrison said during the operation's final briefing, "Your techniques have provided intelligence advantages that could prove decisive in any future conflict. The Chinese clearly believe they have capabilities we cannot detect. That misconception works in our favor." Sarah had learned important lessons about strategic operations during Pacific Watch. Technical innovation was only one component of naval superiority. Intelligence gathering, international coordination, and strategic deception were equally important. Her role as Senior Submarine Warfare Innovation Specialist required understanding these broader aspects of naval warfare. Following Pacific Watch, Sarah's reputation within Navy leadership circles expanded significantly. Her techniques were implemented across additional vessel classes. Her training programs were adopted by NATO navies, and her research received increased funding for development of next-generation capabilities. She found herself regularly briefing congressional committees, defense contractors, and international military leaders. The most significant development was establishment of the Submarine Warfare Innovation Center at Pearl Harbor, with Sarah as the founding director. The center brought together technical specialists, operational experts, and research scientists to develop advanced capabilities for detecting, tracking, and countering submarine threats. It represented the institutionalization of innovation that Admiral Harrison believed essential for maintaining American naval superiority. "Commander," Admiral Harrison told her during the center's dedication ceremony, "when I first learned about your work, I knew we had discovered an exceptional officer. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly you would adapt to strategic responsibilities and leadership challenges." "Thank you, Admiral. The opportunities you've provided have allowed me to contribute in ways I never imagined possible." The Navy invests in technical innovation because it provides operational advantages. But we promote officers because they demonstrate the ability to lead and inspire others. You've done both. Sarah reflected on the journey from that half-empty briefing room to her current responsibilities. The officers who had walked out early had missed learning about innovations that were now considered essential for Pacific Fleet operations. More importantly, they had missed the opportunity to engage with ideas that challenge conventional thinking and open new possibilities. Working at the strategic level had taught Sarah that technical innovation alone was insufficient for maintaining military superiority. Success required building consensus among diverse stakeholders, coordinating complex operations across multiple organizations, and communicating effectively with audiences ranging from technical specialists to political leaders. These skills had been as important as her mathematical abilities in establishing the Submarine Warfare Innovation Center. The center's first major project involved developing artificial intelligence systems that could automate much of the analysis required for displacement detection. Sarah's team was working with contractors from Silicon Valley to create algorithms that could process sonar data in real time, identifying submarine signatures automatically and freeing human operators to focus on tactical decision-making. The next generation of submarine warfare will involve human-machine collaboration, Sarah explained to visiting congressional representatives. "Our displacement analysis provides the foundation, but artificial intelligence systems can process data faster and more consistently than human operators. The combination gives us unprecedented capabilities for detecting and tracking submarine threats. The congressional delegation was impressed by the technical demonstrations and supportive of continued funding for the center's research programs. Sarah had learned to present complex technical concepts in terms that political leaders could understand and appreciate, emphasizing strategic benefits and operational advantages rather than mathematical details. As Sarah's first year as center director concluded, she received notification of another promotion to captain, along with assignment as deputy commander for innovation for the entire Pacific Fleet. Admiral Harrison personally delivered the news during a private meeting in his office. Captain Shun, this promotion reflects not just your technical achievements, but your demonstrated ability to lead large organizations and manage complex strategic programs. You've exceeded every expectation since that first briefing 18 months ago. Admiral, I'm grateful for your continued confidence and the opportunities you've provided to contribute to fleet capabilities. Sarah, when you walked into that conference room to present your displacement analysis techniques, I saw potential that extended far beyond technical innovation. You've proven that exceptional officers can transition successfully from tactical specialists to strategic leaders. Sarah understood that her career had reached another turning point. As Deputy Commander for Innovation, she would be responsible for identifying, developing, and implementing technological advances across all aspects of Pacific Fleet operations. Her authority would extend beyond submarine warfare to include surface vessel capabilities, aviation systems, communications technology, and cybersecurity measures. The promotion also meant that she would work directly with Admiral Harrison on strategic planning, helping to shape Pacific Fleet capabilities for emerging threats and future operational requirements. Her insights would influence decisions affecting thousands of personnel and billions of dollars in naval assets. That evening, Sarah stood on the balcony of her quarters, looking out over Pearl Harbor as the sun set behind the mountains of Oahu. She thought about the young lieutenant who had first noticed unusual water displacement patterns during a joint exercise with Japanese forces, and the long journey that had led to her current responsibilities. The technical work that had begun her career remained important, but Sarah now understood that lasting impact required building institutions and developing other innovators who could continue advancing naval capabilities. The Submarine Warfare Innovation Center would outlive her tenure, continuing to develop technologies that kept American sailors safe and maintained naval superiority in an increasingly challenging world. Sarah's story had become more than personal success. It represented the Navy's ability to recognize exceptional talent and provide opportunities for officers to contribute at the highest levels of strategic planning. Her innovations had proven their value in operations, but her leadership had demonstrated that technical excellence could be combined with strategic vision to create lasting institutional change. 2 years after her promotion to captain and appointment as Deputy Commander for Innovation, Captain Sarah Chun found herself facing the most significant challenge of her career. Intelligence reports indicated that adversary nations had begun developing countermeasures specifically designed to defeat displacement analysis techniques. The advantage that had given American forces superior submarine detection capabilities was beginning to erode. Captain Chun, Admiral Harrison said during their weekly strategic planning meeting, "We need to stay ahead of the technological curve. Our adversaries have clearly studied our capabilities and are adapting their own systems accordingly." Sarah had anticipated this development. Military technology was constantly evolving, with each innovation eventually prompting counter-innovations from opposing forces. The displacement analysis techniques that had been revolutionary 5 years earlier were now widely known and understood, making it inevitable that sophisticated adversaries would develop methods to minimize their effectiveness. Admiral, our intelligence suggests that Chinese and Russian submarine designers are incorporating new hull configurations and propulsion systems specifically intended to reduce displacement signatures. They're also experimenting with decoy systems that could produce false displacement patterns. What are your recommendations for maintaining our technological advantage? Sarah had been working with her research team to develop next-generation detection capabilities that would remain effective even against these new countermeasures. The solutions required fundamental advances in multiple technical areas, representing the most ambitious research program she had ever undertaken. We're developing quantum sensor arrays that can detect gravitational anomalies caused by submarine mass displacement. We're also working on neural network systems that can identify authentic displacement patterns even when countermeasures are employed. Both technologies are approximately 18 months from operational deployment. Admiral Harrison studied the technical briefing materials with his characteristic attention to detail. Resource requirements? Significant but justified. The quantum sensors require new manufacturing partnerships with specialized contractors. The neural networks need massive computational resources for training and operation. Total development costs will exceed previous innovation programs, but the strategic advantages justify the investment. The meeting continued with discussions of implementation timelines, international cooperation agreements, and strategic implications of maintaining American technological superiority in submarine warfare. Sarah had learned that conversations at this level inevitably involved balancing technical possibilities against political realities and resource constraints. Following the meeting, Sarah returned to the Innovation Center to coordinate the multiple research programs under her supervision. Her team had grown to include over 60 specialists working on projects ranging from advanced sonar systems to autonomous underwater vehicles. Managing this diverse group required leadership skills that complemented her technical expertise. Captain Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, the center's senior research scientist, reported, "We've achieved another breakthrough in quantum sensor calibration. The prototype systems are detecting mass displacements with precision that exceeds our theoretical projections." Sarah reviewed the test data with satisfaction. The quantum sensors represented collaboration between Navy researchers and civilian scientists from universities and technology companies across the country. The project demonstrated how military innovation could benefit from partnerships that brought together diverse expertise and perspectives. How soon can we begin testing aboard operational vessels? The first prototype will be ready for sea trials within 6 months. We'll need to select a submarine crew with appropriate security clearances and technical training capabilities. Sarah made a note to coordinate with submarine squadron commanders about vessel selection and crew preparation. Sea trials would be crucial for validating the quantum sensors under realistic operational conditions and identifying any practical limitations that hadn't appeared during laboratory testing. The neural network development was proceeding on a parallel timeline, with artificial intelligence specialist training systems to recognize submarine displacement patterns even when sophisticated countermeasures were employed. This work involved analyzing thousands of hours of sonar data, teaching the networks to distinguish between authentic submarine signatures and various types of deception systems. The challenge, explained Dr. Michael Park, the center's AI development coordinator, is creating networks that can adapt to new countermeasures without extensive retraining. Our adversaries will continue developing new deception technologies, so our systems must be able to learn and evolve autonomously. Sarah understood the strategic importance of this capability. Previous detection technologies had required months or years to adapt to new countermeasures, creating windows of vulnerability that adversaries could exploit. Neural networks that could adapt rapidly to new threats would maintain American advantages even as adversary capabilities evolved. As development work continued, Sarah received word that she had been selected for promotion to Rear Admiral and assignment as Director of Naval Innovation for the entire United States Navy. The position would move her from Pearl Harbor to the Pentagon, where she would oversee innovation programs across all naval warfare areas and coordinate technology development with other military services. Admiral Harrison personally informed her of the promotion during a ceremony attended by Pacific Fleet leadership and Innovation Center staff. Admiral Chun, your journey from technical specialist to strategic leader exemplifies the Navy's commitment to recognizing and developing exceptional talent. Your innovations have provided tactical advantages that strengthen national security. Sarah was honored by the promotion, but also somewhat melancholy about leaving the Innovation Center and the team she had built. The researchers and specialists at Pearl Harbor had become colleagues and friends whose dedication to advancing naval capabilities inspired her daily work. Admiral Harrison, working with the Pacific Fleet has been the defining experience of my career. The opportunities you provided transformed my understanding of how technical innovation contributes to strategic objectives. Admiral Chun, your work is just beginning. At the Pentagon, you'll have resources and authority to drive innovation across the entire Navy. Your experience with submarine warfare will inform broader programs that enhance capabilities in all domains. The transition to Washington represented another major shift in Sarah's responsibilities. As Director of Naval Innovation, she would coordinate technology development programs worth billions of dollars, work directly with defense contractors and research institutions, and brief Congress regularly on naval capability developments. Her technical expertise would inform decisions affecting the future of American naval power. During her final week at Pearl Harbor, Sarah visited the various facilities where her innovations had been implemented. She toured the USS Columbia, where her displacement analysis techniques were now standard operating procedure. She observed training sessions where new sonar operators learned methods she had pioneered. She reviewed intelligence reports showing continued success of techniques she had developed years earlier. Ma'am, Petty Officer Thompson, whom Sarah had first worked with during her early submarine deployments, approached her during the USS Columbia visit. I wanted to thank you for the training and opportunities you provided. Your techniques saved lives during our deployment last year, when we detected a hostile submarine that would have remained undetected otherwise. These personal interactions reminded Sarah why innovation mattered, not for the recognition or advancement it might provide, but for the practical advantages it gave to sailors facing dangerous situations. Every improvement in detection capability meant better protection for American personnel and more effective completion of strategic missions. Sarah's farewell ceremony at the Innovation Center was attended by researchers, military personnel, and civilian contractors who had contributed to the various programs under her direction. Admiral Harrison presented her with the Distinguished Service Medal, recognizing her contributions to naval warfare capabilities and strategic planning. The work accomplished at this center over the past 3 years represents a transformation in how the Navy approaches technological innovation, Admiral Harrison said during the ceremony. Admiral Chun established processes and partnerships that will continue advancing naval capabilities long after her departure. Sarah's final act as Center Director was approving the operational deployment of quantum sensor arrays aboard 3 Pacific Fleet submarines. The sensors had completed successful sea trials and were ready for integration into fleet operations. Her last innovation at Pearl Harbor would provide advantages that maintained American submarine warfare superiority despite evolving adversary countermeasures. As Sarah prepared for her move to Washington, she reflected on the journey from that first briefing where senior officers had walked out early. Her persistence in developing displacement analysis had led to recognition, promotion, and opportunities to contribute at the highest levels of naval strategic planning. More importantly, her work had resulted in capabilities that enhanced national security and protected American sailors. The Pentagon assignment would present different challenges and opportunities. Instead of focusing on submarine warfare specifically, Sarah would oversee innovation programs affecting aircraft carriers, destroyers, amphibious vessels, and support ships. She would work with contractors developing hypersonic weapons, directed energy systems, unmanned vehicles, and cyber warfare capabilities. Admiral Chun, Admiral Harrison said during their final private meeting, "Your success demonstrates that exceptional officers can transition successfully from technical specialization to strategic leadership. Your experience with innovation management will be invaluable as the Navy adapts to emerging threats and new operational requirements." Admiral Harrison, the opportunities you provided changed my career and my understanding of how individual contributions support larger strategic objectives. I hope to provide similar opportunities for other innovative officers. Sarah's story had evolved from individual technical achievement to institutional leadership that would influence naval capabilities for decades. The Submarine Warfare Innovation Center would continue developing advanced detection technologies. The training program she established would prepare future sonar operators. The partnerships she built with civilian researchers would generate continued technological advances. As Sarah departed Pearl Harbor for the final time, she understood that her greatest contribution might not be the specific technique she had developed, but the processes and institutions she had established for continued innovation. The Navy's ability to maintain technological superiority depended on identifying and supporting exceptional officers who could develop revolutionary capabilities and then adapt to broader leadership responsibilities. Admiral Harrison watched Sarah's aircraft disappear into the Pacific sky, confident that he had identified and developed an officer whose contributions would extend far beyond her original technical innovations. Sarah's journey from the half-empty briefing room to the Pentagon demonstrated the Navy's commitment to recognizing talent wherever it emerged and providing opportunities for exceptional officers to contribute at the highest levels of strategic planning. Years later, when naval historians studied the technological developments that maintained American maritime superiority during the early 21st century, they would trace many advances to the displacement analysis techniques first developed by a young lieutenant commander whose innovative thinking had initially been dismissed by senior officers who left her briefings early. Sarah's persistence, technical excellence, and eventual leadership had created lasting institutional changes that strengthened national security and inspired a new generation of military innovators. The story concluded not with individual recognition, but with systemic transformation that ensured the Navy's continued ability to identify, develop, and implement revolutionary technologies that protected American interests and maintained peace through strength. Sarah's career exemplified how exceptional officers could contribute to strategic objectives while building institutions that would continue their work long after their individual service ended.